Okay. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for being here so early in the morning. I'm going to talk about Drupal basic concepts, and the session is called Understanding Drupal. You can follow the slide deck there, otherwise I will just tweet about it later. My name is Mauricio Dinarte. You can find me as dinarcon pretty much anywhere in the internet. That is my email and my Drupal.org username. I am from Nicaragua. Nicaragua is known as the land of lakes and volcanoes, and we really mean that. Like, that is a freshwater lake with an island. On that island there are two volcanoes. One is active, one is dormant. And in one of the volcanoes there is a lagoon, so water, land, and so on. If you want to have a sneak peek about volcanoes in Nicaragua, you can go to that website and you can actually see a full tour of someone going down almost touching the lava. Or, better yet, you can come to Lakes and Volcanoes Drupal Camp, which is happening in November this year. So you will have a lot of chances to get water and volcanoes and so much more. Going to wait a little bit for the people coming in. So yeah, if you want to go to a warm place this November, Nicaragua is a good option, and we will love you to have you there. I work with a company called Agari, which is based in Boston, but we are actually a distributed team. And coming soon, muy pronto, prochainement, I don't know how to say that. I have a personal project. I am really passionate about teaching, and I have a personal project about providing Drupal material in different languages. It is not ready yet, but it is coming soon later this year. But just like for you to know that that is going to happen. And I have some stickers that if you want, you can take at the end of the session. And this is an outline of what we're going to cover today. First of all, why do we want to use Drupal? I know that we're in a Drupal camp, and it's like obvious, because it's the best CMS in the world, but there are many reasons for that. So one of the reasons is Drupal security. So for example, the White House uses Drupal, and as you can imagine, they require very high levels of security in their website. Weather.com, this is the biggest Drupal website in the world in terms of traffic. They serve over 1 billion unique visitors per month. We also have the Grammys, and this one in particular is interesting because the night of the event, they broadcast the whole thing live. So you got video, audio, images, articles, everything, massive traffic in one single night. Web Economic Forum is also built on Drupal, and this one, it is really hard to see, but at the top you get multilingual, like a multilingual menu. So this is demonstrating how Drupal can be used for building multilingual sites. Examiner.com is also built on Drupal. Naranja, Tradicional de Gandia. This is a small business in Barcelona, if I am not mistaken. They sell 6 products: oranges, tangerines, honey, marmalade, lemons, and sweets. So, although Drupal can be used to power really big and high-profile websites, it can also help your own local startup, your own local business, or your own local idea. So, another reason to use it. And Tesla Motors also uses Drupal. Unfortunately, we haven't reached the cars yet, but we hope one day we will be there too. So just like a refresher, with Drupal we have high security. Like, there is a dedicated team of around 50 people working to make Drupal secure and to respond when new security vulnerabilities come up. A lot of multilingual support, in particular in Drupal 8, it is much better now. You can use Drupal for e-commerce. You can scale Drupal to support high demand of traffic. And Drupal will also provide tools for making your website responsive to adapt to different screen sizes, and you get a lot of multilingual support. So if that convinces you, now what is Drupal? Depending on who you ask, Drupal is many different things. We're going to focus on the CMS part today. Drupal as a CMS, that stands for Content Management System. It allows multiple people to participate in the creation of content. So you don't have to share credentials like, give me your password and I will post on your behalf. It is also possible to create publication workflows, and we're going to talk a little bit about this later, but imagine that in a newspaper, you have journalists who are able to create articles, but that needs to go through a review process. So the journalist can only create, then there is an editor who cannot create but only edit, and even this person needs like an approval from someone else to make the article go live in the newspaper. So there is a, like say, department chief that they cannot create nor delete. Their only job is to, turn the switch, like this is going live, yes or no. Otherwise, go back to the publication workflow. So with Drupal, you can have very specific roles and permissions for different type of users. You can also have content revisioning, and in Drupal, content revisioning refers to keeping track of changes. So if someone makes any change in Drupal, and this comes enabled by default, Drupal will keep track of who did the change and when. So if you change a letter, if you add an image, if you change, a tag, everything will be kept track of, and you will know who did it and when. And if for some reason that change should not have happened, you can even like go back to a previous revisions. You just say, oh, go back to the previous version, and Drupal will do that for you without any effort. And you can have very granular access control over each piece of information. Let's say that you have a store where you have, the price for the general public, but there are some VIP customers that you want to keep a discount. So everything on the website will be exactly the same, except for the price for those specific users. So in Drupal, you can define controls so that this specific price will change depending on who is viewing the website, and everything else is remain the same. Drupal is also a framework, and this is mostly for development, and the idea is that you can extend Drupal beyond its original functionality. For example, you can create e-commerce websites, or you can use Drupal as the backend of a mobile application or a React or Angular application. And arguably one of the biggest things in Drupal is that it is a community. So there are people from all over the world, and I am an example, coming from Nicaragua to present at the camp, different countries, different languages, different cultures, lots of contributors, and thousands of active users. So you're not alone. If you need help, you will very likely find someone who will be able to assist you if you have the need. Now let's go over the basic concepts. So imagine that we have a very small website, like a few pages only, and in this case, like the slash in the first image is just like the home page, and then we have a page for about the organization, for the team, so for the services that are offered, for articles, for a way to contact us. And let's say in the articles we have one page that aggregates all the articles, and then one page for each of the individual ones. So the idea of the session is like how to dissect a page. Like we know everyone uses the internet. You go to websites regularly, and you can identify like we have headers, footers, sidebars, and so on. But what are the names of those things in Drupal, and how is the page built when working with a Drupal site? So that's the objective. As a basis, Drupal has a concept of core. Drupal core is the minimum required software to have a Drupal project. If you don't have Drupal core, it is not Drupal. It can be anything else. Among other things, core comes with modules and themes, and core in itself is the framework that you can build on top of. But let's focus on the modules and themes. The modules are responsible for adding functionality to the website, and the themes control appearance. So let's give an example. Let's say that in my organization, every time that I create a new article, I want automatically to post a tweet with a link to that article, or post to the Facebook page with a link to that article. So that is functionality. Functionality will be provided by modules. On the other hand, if you want to change, let's say, the color scheme or the layout of the website, that is appearance. When it is appearance, it is the job of the theme. So there is a very clear distinction between those two. And just like a node, there are some themes that provide functionality. For example, there are themes that come with image slideshows. That is not common, and it is preferred not to do it in the theme layer, but using modules. But just for you to know that that happens, like if you see a theme providing functionality, well, it is possible, but it is preferred not to do it that way. And in addition to that, we have the content repository. Very likely with Drupal core will not be enough to build your website, so this is like Legos, like you have different modules and different themes, and you can assemble together, put one on top of the other to build something else, something bigger. So in the content repositories, we have more modules, we have more themes, and we also have distributions. Distributions are like pre-packaged version of Drupal, specific for one use case. So for example, if you are building a website for a church, there is a distribution called Open Church that has a lot of functionality already built in. There is one called Restaurant for restaurants, for governments, for having your online resume, for having an e-commerce store. If you go to the distribution sections in Drupal.org, you will find like dozens of those. And they will make your job easier because a lot of things come already pre-configured. We said that we're going to focus on the CMS part of Drupal, so the C stands for content, and the basic piece of information in Drupal is called a node. So what is a node? A node is a piece of information that can tell a story by itself. And this is better explained by an example. Imagine that we have this car like on the screen. If we want to describe that car, what can we tell about it? We can say, you know, its color, its plate, the make, the model, the year. We can say how many doors, how many windows, what type of fuel, and how many doors, and so on. So if we want to describe something in Drupal, we're going to describe it using a node. So the noding itself, it's like a container used to describe something. This is an example of a node in Drupal. There are a couple of things that every node in Drupal has. For example, a title, an author, and a publication date. Also, internally, they have something that is called node ID or NID. That is a number that starts with 1, and every time that you create a new node, that number increases by 1. So node 2, node 3, and so on. Let's say that, you know, I have this website and I have articles pretty often, and now I am, you know, I wrote a new article, go check it out. It is example.com/node/1500-3049. Like, people will never remember that. I don't even remember it saying it a few seconds ago. So in addition to having the internal identifier, nodes can also have path aliases or URL aliases. So in this case, it is like /blogs/altering views results. That is easier to remember for us humans, and it can also help with SEO and other things. Oops, oh, we're still there. So that is something that all nodes have in common. And there are other characteristics. For example, a node can be published or unpublished. And why would you have a node created that is not published? Maybe it is not ready yet. If you're writing a news article, you might not have all the facts, or you might, you know, it's a very long article and you need to check with someone else, or just doing it in batches, in small pieces. So you can save your progress so far, keep it unpublished, and when you think it is ready, change the status. So we already talked about cars. Can we have more wheels? Yes, we can have a website that not only talks about cars, but also about motorcycles, tricycles, motorcycles, and so on. And when we have different type of objects that we want to represent in Drupal, nodes by themselves do not suffice. We need some layers of abstraction. So, for example, a motorcycle is very different than a car in the sense that motorcycles doesn't have windows. And Rachel might correct me, but as far as I know, motorcycles cannot go backwards, like in reverse. So they are very different objects in real life, and in Drupal we're going to use a different layer of abstraction to group each of these type of objects. And that layer of abstraction is called content type. So the content type is a group of nodes that share similar characteristics or describe the same idea. When you are creating a node, you create a node of one specific content type, and that will be your template. In Drupal core, out of the box, you have two content types, basic pages and articles. And if you have used them, you might remember that the articles have an extra field for adding an image and for adding tags, while the basic page does not. So again, those are two different content types. They represent two different ideas. Each of them is configured differently, and that the content typing itself is going to serve as the template. Whatever you define on the content type is the information that you are going to collect when creating nodes. And when you do this, it is easier to manage the information, because you can say, for example, instead of having all the nodes on the website, I want to show only cars, I want to show only motorcycles, and so on. And nodes and content types can be used for describing like physical objects, like a car, but it can also be used for describing untangible things, like an event, like something like this. This event has a price, or maybe not, has a location, has a date, has a max capacity of people who can attend, and so on. So we can have a content type for event where we collect all this information for different types, for different events, Drupal camps, and so on. So one important thing to note, and I said it before, but it is really important to understand, one node can be of only one content type, but one content type can have as many nodes as you want. And the numbers here represent the node ID, and as you can see, they do not repeat, like they are unique. So let's say that using nodes and content types, we were able to isolate all the cars in my website, but I want to do more. Maybe my business is about selling cars, and just showing like 3,000 cars to someone will not do any good. So I need to provide the user the functionality to do more refined searches. Like, let's say I want all the red cars that are Toyota, Yaris, Vilon 2010 and onwards. So how do you do that in Drupal? You do that using fields, and fields are awesome. Before, I used to have a really long technical text here, but it was boring and really confusing. So instead I'm going to use examples to describe what are fields. So anybody here has used either Facebook or Twitter before, at least once in their lifetime? A couple of people, yeah. So in Facebook and Twitter, you have a white canvas. You can write anything that you like, although in Twitter you are limited to 140 characters. But let's use Facebook as an example. People write poems. They get inspired and write poems. They put pictures, images. They can put anything that they want in that specific block of page, like a space. But there is a problem with this. This is free text, and doing searches on free text is really hard because people can write whatever they want. Maybe they make mistakes in grammar, in spelling, or use abbreviations, or use anything that is not common. So trying to do a search on a free text form, it's really, really complicated. Also, when you have something like that, you have the risk of entering inconsistent data, like November 19 using the full month, or using like an abbreviation of the month, or using numbers instead of letters, or using 2 digits instead of 4 for the year, or dashes instead of slashes, or like in my country, we put first the day and then the month. So because you are not enforcing anything, it is like a white canvas, people can enter whatever they want, and it is like really hard to find something when there are so many inconsistencies. Also, you can enter invalid data. How old are you? Minus 10 years old. When is your birthday? February 31st. What is the price? With, dollar sign, but in euros. Email, it doesn't even have an @ sign. The phone, that is not even a number. So, you're not enforcing anything. And all of this makes Drupal cry. When you have free text, inconsistent data, or invalid data, Drupal, it gets really, really sad. So how can you make Drupal happy? You use fields. So with fields, you can enforce validation criteria. For example, you can mark a field as required, and when someone is creating a node, if that field in particular is not filled, like let's say, I have an event content type, and I mark the date of the event as required. If someone tries to save an event without a date, it will cause a validation error, and it will not be possible to save that. And it is also important to know that in Drupal, there are different types of fields, and each of them come with their own validation criteria. For example, on the right here, we see validation criteria for numbers. So in this case, it's a price. We said that the minimum is 0. I mean, we can have an event for free, but we're not going to pay you to come to the event. And we're not enforcing any maximum, like if someone wants to pay $1 billion for coming to a Drupal camp, that's perfect. You can also define prefixes and suffixes, so there is no doubt about the currency that you're going to use for the pricing of the event. Let's say that you can allow images to be uploaded. So on the other image we have you can allow certain file extensions, like for example, if you don't want people uploading GIF to your website, you just remove GIF from the list and it won't be allowed. You can define maximum and minimum resolutions. You can define maximum upload sizes of the images themselves, and so on. So for each type of field, you will have different validation criteria, and this makes Drupal happy. And if you want to make Drupal love you, this is how you do it. When you are defining your content type, you are going to create one field for each specific piece of data that you want to store. So going back to the car example, if the plate, the year, the make, the model, the type of fuel, the number of windows, and so on, each of those is going to be its own field, because this will later allow us to do searches on each of those specific elements. And in addition to creating one field per type of data, you also need to select the right type of field. So integer, decimal, images, phone, email, and so on. So Drupal core comes with a lot of fields. If you enable modules in Drupal core, you get more fields. For example, the phone field doesn't come enabled out of the box. You need to go to the modules page and enable the module, and you get that extra field. And in the contrib repositories, you get even more fields. So there are a lot of choices for you to select. And this is an example of some field types, like just single line text field. In Drupal, there is a difference between single line and multi-line text field. So single line text field, multi-line text field. When it says established in 2006, that is actually a number field that has a prefix of established in. Like, we don't want people saying created on or established in or just the number. We want it to be consistent. So in order to make it consistent, we define it as a number field. Let's say that we are only interested in organizations from 2000 and onwards. We define a minimum of 2000, and then we define a prefix of established in. We can also have URLs, emails, phone numbers, dates, which might actually have a time associated with them. And this where it says services, those are taxonomies. Like in the article, you get tags, that's what it represents. So with fields, you are allowed to collect data in more than one way. Like fields are very flexible in how they collect the data. Let's assume this doesn't exist, but it is in theory possible to have one field to store location information. And that field allows you to do it in 4 different ways. One is to use it like a human readable text, and internally that is geocoded. Another option is for the field to allow entering latitude and longitude. The other option is to have the field show a map, and you click on the map to select the location. And in the same way that we have Word documents or PDF documents, there are some file types specifically about storing geographical information. One of them is called KML. So we can have like an file upload widget, and we upload this file, and that file contains the location of that we want to store. So in Drupal, in theory, you can have all of these. In practice, there are modules that if you combine them, you can get something like this, but there is no one single field that gives you all of them. But in theory, it is possible. And one of the jobs of the field is making the information that it is stored consistent. So no matter how you collect it, you can present it in a different way. Let's say that you store it as a latitude and longitude, but when presented to the user, you present it as a map. And Drupal can even do more for you. Drupal can aggregate the data. So you collect a lot of different events and you show them aggregated in a map. So this is a real website. It is called Drupal, and this is how I found out about this event and decided to come. It lists like Drupal events all over the world. So if you want to, go on vacation to different places, this is a very good excuse to travel. But the point that I want to make here is that here we are storing event information. That event information includes the title, the location, the date, the type of event, and where it is happening, the location itself. If you see on the map, the pointers are color-coded. That is actually 2 different fields working together. So one field for the location and one field for the type of event. So depending on the type, there are different colors. So when presenting the information, once you collect it, you can aggregate it and combine it and present it any way that you want. And again, fields are awesome, so there is more to fields. When you have these different fields, you can show them and hide them individually. Like you can cherry pick. Let's say that for some reason, in an event like this, you want to count how many people attended each session, but you don't want to make that information public to everyone, just for the organizers. So in the content type, you can have like a field that says attendance, and that field is hidden by default, and only these people with special permissions will be able to see them. So the way that you control this, in like cherry picking of what to show and what not to show, it is done on a field basis. So again, if you want to be able to do this, separate that information that you collect in different fields. And this is the slide that I had before. Fields are used to structure the information that is going to be stored. They say discrete data, and this is going to be used for filtering, sorting. It is possible to collect and display in different ways, and it is possible to show and hide as needed. So far, we have only covered nodes, content types, and fields. That is like in the screenshot, the middle part, like the center. So about 80% of the time when you visit a Drupal website, you are visiting nodes, and one node of one specific content type. In this case, we know that all the nodes have a title, and let's say in this case they have an image field and some other fields with more content. But what about the rest? What about everything else, the surrounding of the website? Everything else is a block. So in Drupal, a block is a container of extra information that you want to display along the main content of the website. And they are placed in a theme region. So just like a quick detour from blocks, I want to explain what a theme region is. So when you install Drupal out of the box, it comes with a blue shade theme called Bartik. Every theme defines theme regions, and theme regions is where you can place content. In this case, all the yellow rectangles, those are regions. And the way that you find this, because everything is going to be different, when you go to the block, like structure blocks, there is a link in the top left that says demonstrate block regions. And when you do that, you get something like this. And for your theme, you will get something different. And remember that the theme is the one responsible for controlling the appearance and the layout. And what does that mean? For example, there is a region called Feature Top that maybe it's not very clear in the screenshot, but it is gray. It has a gray background. When you install Drupal out of the box, you never see a gray background. And why is that? Because in that region, there is a single block placed there. And Bartik, that theme, decided that if there is nothing placed in that region, it is going to be collapsed. Collapsed means hidden, so you will not see it. The same happens with the sidebars. If you don't place content in any of the sidebars, it will be collapsed. And the main region called content in the middle, it is going to expand to use that space. So all this behavior of how the different regions behave, that is the responsibility of the theme. On the contrary, we have in the footer like 4 columns. If you place content in one of them but not in the others, it will not stretch automatically. It will respect the boundary of the region. So it is up to the theme to determine how it will behave. Now, going back to blocks. So blocks can be used to display either static or dynamic content. A static content is one that never changes or almost never changes. Let's say the copyright text in the footer, it is like it changes once a year. And in an event like this, we have sponsors, so we might want to show the sponsors in every page impression. So that is in theory static. We can also have dynamic content that this changes regularly. Let's say we want to show up on the sidebar the latest blog post, and if we write a blog post every day, that will be changing every day. If we write a blog post every hour, that will be changing every hour. Or, newest products in the store, and so on. Blocks can also enforce visibility rules. So you can say, show these blocks only when certain conditions are met. And those conditions can be language. For example, this information is only relevant for the Dutch audience or for the German audience or for the French audience, and so on. You can do it by content type. Let's say we have a blog that says more articles by the same author. It would make sense to show this blog in the article content type. But it doesn't make sense to show that blog in the event content type because events do not write articles, so we can do it by content type. We can also do it by pages. Let's say I want to show this only on the front page, or only on the contact page, or only in the services section of my website. You can define patterns of URLs. And you can negate the condition too, like I want to show this everywhere except on the front page, for example. And you can also do it by roles, which we're going to talk later. Blogs can also be aware of their environments. That is, if you are presenting a blog in a node, the blog can read, for example, who is the author of that node, and then change its content based on that information. So for user Peter, it will show something. For user Mary, it will show something else. So for the blog in itself can collect information of the page where it is being displayed. So you can have more articles by the same author, or more vehicles or cars in the same city, and so on. And in the same ways as content types, blogs can have fields. So let's say that we have a special offer block where we have a title, a description, an image, and an expiration date. And we will show this special offer as long as the expiration date doesn't come in the right sidebar, for example. So you can have this. And most of the things that I am talking about, they are version agnostic. I mean, that applies the same for Drupal 7 or 8. But the capabilities for blocks to have fields, that is new in Drupal 8. In Drupal 7, there is a module called Bean, B-E-A-N, that was used to add fields to blocks. Now you can do it without any module, just with Drupal core. And now talking about views. So views is huge. We can have a full camp only talking about views. And I'm going to try to summarize it in 2 slides, so bear with me. A view is a listing of information. Anytime that you think of a list of something in Drupal, it will very likely be built using views. So you can build a list of nodes, user, comments, files, taxonomy terms, and so on. And the way that views works is like they query your website based on the fields and the content type information. That is why having different fields is important. Once the information is collected, you can present it in different formats. For example, you can show the same information as an HTML page, as an RSS feed, as a PDF document or CSV or Excel document. You can show a map, you can show an image slideshow, you can have a JSON file, and so on. So the view in itself, what it's going to do is collect the information and then allow you to show it in different formats. And this is an example of a view. So following the car example, in the table, we see the first column, it has like the plate, the year, the make, and the model. One thing to note, and as I said before, you should store this information in their own fields. So internally, there are 4 different fields, one for the plate, the year, the make, and the model. But when we create a view, we can change how that is going to be presented. And instead of showing 4 different columns, we just glue them together and put them in one. So that is the view working. Another thing is that we have an image. Oops. We have an image. And it is not obvious here, but let's imagine that we work for this organization and we take photos with our phones. Each one has a different phone with different resolutions and so on. Maybe the images come in different sizes, in different aspect ratios and so on. In Drupal, there is a system called image styles that its job is to like pre-process the images so that they are consistent to whatever rules you define. So in this case, the view was configured to use some image style that define the height and the width and the aspect ratio. And no matter what is the source of the image, all of them are going to be presented consistently without you having to do a lot of work. And we have more fields. So here we are showing what we want to the user, but maybe the user wants something else. So we want to give more flexibility to the visitor of the website. So when we create a view and we have different fields, for each of those fields, we can have something that is called views exposed filters, which what we see at the top below cars and above apply, we see that we have some drop downs for year, for make, for model, and we can even define how sorting works, like by year, ascending or descending. So this is possible because we have fields. If we didn't have fields, it wouldn't be possible. And the idea is that I provide some default information, but the user can drill down to whatever he or she wants. Another thing, on the top left, we see a photo of one car only, and that was also created using a view. And when I said before, views are used to create listing of information, it is when I hear the word list, I usually think 2 or more. But in this case, I am only showing 1. Why is that? there are some cases when a list of one makes sense. For example, in this case, I am showing a random car. So every time someone refreshes the page, that car is going to change. And that is a list of one random element. You can also have lists of the most or the top, like the most visited article, the most commented article, the most expensive car, whatever. For the most, the top, the better, the higher, you can have a view of one element, and that is also fine. Okay, why so much theory? I mean, it's boring, right? It is important to understand all of these and even more concepts because Drupal loves nest. And we love nesting or markup. For front-end developers, you might recognize that we have maybe 15 levels of divs to print one string. But more importantly, we nest concepts. So one concept being on top of each other. For example, so a concept built on top of each other. Remember that we can have like more articles by the same author. In that case, that piece of information is presented in a theme region. That theme region contains a blog. That blog was created using a view. That view shows nodes, and those nodes have fields. So for one specific piece of content, you are interacting at least with 5 different layers. So that is why it is important to understand, like, I am dealing with a blog, I am dealing with a node, I am dealing with a view, and so on. Because if you want to modify how Drupal works or how it behaves, there are different pages for each type of each of these concepts. So very briefly now, what is a user? A user is a visitor to the website, and it is possible to change the information presented based on the user. With the user system, you have roles. A role is a collection of permissions, and they are used to give privilege to someone to take some action on the website. By default, Drupal comes with 3 roles. One is anonymous user, authenticated user, and administrator. The administrator can do anything on the website, so be very careful to who you give that role. But you can create more roles as needed. A role being a collection of permission. What is a permission in itself? A permission is just a check. Can someone perform one specific action? For example, can they create articles? Can they revert revisions? Can they post comments? Can they use site-wide contact form? And so on. So you will get lots, like literally at least 100 of permissions in Drupal core alone. And in general, how does the permission system works? If I have Mary, and I want to give Mary the permission to post articles to my website, the way that it works is like this. You have a lot of permissions, and you bolt them then together in one role, and you assign that role to the person, in this case, Mary. It is possible for one person to wear multiple hats. That means like to have different roles. When that is the case, the sum of all the permissions of each role is all the actions that that person can perform on the website. We also have menus. So a menu is a collection of links used to navigate through the website, and menus can be hierarchical. An example of this, in the top we see like a one-level menu, like home, services, blog, about, and so on. And below, there is a module called TV Mega Menu available for Drupal 7. If you want to have really fancy, probably crazy menus, you can use that module, because you have like a top level, each of them can have sub-levels with different menus, and you can even embed videos and post images and stuff. If you want to do that in a menu, you can do it. We also have the taxonomy system, which is a really weird word, at least for me. But it is very simple. It is just 2 different concepts. The taxonomy system is used for categorization, and the only thing that you need to care about are vocabularies and terms. So when you use this system, you collect, you connect, relate, and classify information in your website. And you have one vocabulary. Vocabulary is just like a name and a grouping of taxonomy terms, and the taxonomy terms themselves, you know, in this case, I have a name and I have an image. So taxonomies, in the same ways as blogs, in the same ways as content type, they can have fields. So in this case, I added an image field to add, you know, to the taxonomy term itself. And vocabularies can be hierarchical. So, you know, we have kingdom, phylum, class. This is for classifying living organisms. And like 17 levels deep, we are Homo sapiens sapiens. So you can have these hierarchies using taxonomies. So a real life example, you can use it for pet categorization, like that. Or not so useful examples, you can have by default, when you use the taxonomy system, for each term, for each taxonomy term, you get one special page that lists all the notes, all the content of your website that was tagged with that specific term. But that is Drupal core out of the box, but you can add modules to that. So you can use a module called similar by term to add more, to show related notes based on the taxonomy term, or you can use a module called workbench access for defining permissions based on taxonomies, or location taxonomize, a Drupal 7 module that is no longer required in Drupal 8, but you can associate geographical information with taxonomies. And this is, you know, how you build a Drupal website, mixing and matching all these different concepts. So, well, we're going to skip the FAQ because there is only one question. So thank you very much. I will be around if you have more questions. I will love to have your feedback. And thanks again for being here.